Okay, good evening, everybody. This is Wednesday, September 3rd, and it is Sahavas for everyone on Baba Zoom. We are doing a 12-month program of alternating 12 ways of realizing me and interviews with various different Baba people. I'll give a little plug for the mid-September Sahavas for everyone will be us interviewing Nashwan Anzar or Nashwan Nalavala, whichever you prefer. And we have tons of questions for him. It's promising to be quite a good show. That's the one coming up in 2 weeks. Today, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to do the 12 Ways of Realizing Me way number 9, because it's September, so 9. Baba gave out this message of 12 ways of realizing me, which I believe he means realizing God means realizing Baba. It's the same thing to me. And he says, if you renounce for me everything physical, mental, and spiritual, then you have me. So way number 9 is renunciation. If you renounce for me everything that is physical, if you renounce for me everything physical, mental, and spiritual, then you have me. Now, I find that quite interesting because he says everything physical, mental, and spiritual. So I'd like to explore that with you all. Physical makes sense to me, and I will tell you what I know Baba said in addition. He said, yes, obviously on the spiritual path, I'm paraphrasing, but obviously on the spiritual path, you have to renounce things. But he said it's much more important to renounce them internally than to renounce them externally. But most people start by renouncing things externally before they can renounce them internally. But once you've renounced it internally, he said, you don't actually need to renounce it externally because you've already renounced it internally. So that's quite interesting. For example, we can look at the example of Narayan Maharaj, who was a perfect master and Baba's master. And he had a lot of money that he got from one of his disciples. Long story. So he had a nice car, he had nice clothing, and he even had a railway car. Erico told me this story. He had a railway car that he would attach to a train when he wanted to go somewhere. That's how much money he had. So he had his own private railway car attached to a train. So, but because he was perfect master and one with God, he had internally, of course, renounced everything. So there was no attachment there. So I think this idea of renunciation, to me, and I want to hear from you all, must be related to, in some way, attachment and desire. And that, like, if I wanted to renounce coffee, for example, because it was getting in the way of my relationship with Baba, I might start with first not having coffee physically and not going to Starbucks and buying the latte. And then eventually I could renounce it internally. And then if I had renounced it internally and it no longer was in the way of my relationship with Baba, and somebody said, hey, I'm making a latte, would you want one? And I could say, sure, but it's no longer like a block or an issue. So I'll leave it at that for the moment. And I want to honor that Jeff White has joined us. Hi, Jeff. And hear from you all. Where are you at with this idea of renunciation before we do the mental and spiritual?
Do you think?
Hey. Hi.
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 Hello,
Who's? Can we get introduced?
Yeah, sure. Jeff and Licia, can you introduce yourselves to our Sahavas for Everyone group?
Well, thank you very much. I'm Jeffrey White, and I've been a Baba lover since 1968. And Lisa, my wonderful partner and wife, and she's I would say been a Baba lover since the day we met.
Yes.
And
Which was when?
It was in 1988.
Us too. We're 38,
Oh,
How
38
cool.
years this year.
88.
Yes.
That was a good year.
And Jeff,
And we're-
just
oh, sorry.
to put it into context, Jeff, you've been following Baba longer than I've been alive.
That's a little scary. But that's cool. Okay, great.
And where
Well,
do you
know,
guys live?
we're in South Florida, in a place called Wellington, which is in Palm Beach County on the eastern side of Florida. Right.
We are on the right coast. We're in Venice Beach.
Oh, okay.
California.
Cool.
That's cool.
Well, perhaps we should find a way to connect, like, in
Let's
other
start
ways.
here.
Yeah.
Not Venice, Florida, Venice Beach, California.
Oh, there is a Venice. That's
Sorry.
right.
I realized
You threw me
that
off. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Easy.
Okay.
Well,
We're just going to put our image out because we're just in the kitchen and we're making stuff, and then when we get settled down, we'll be good. Okay.
It'll take
Yeah.
us time.
Keep in mind, Jeff and Licia, you never have to have your video on. You never have to speak. You can be on mute. There's no requirement when I run Sahavas for everyone for anybody to participate in any other way than just being present. There's no requirement. You can always come off mute and speak. You can always share your image, but there's no requirement to do so.
Okay. We'll be back. Okay.
Okay.
It'll take us 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
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 This is.
Laurent, I wanted to ask you what you just said a few minutes ago, that you could have the cough once you renounced it internally and externally, you could have it again because it sounded to me like the charge had been gone. It had no
That's
power.
right. That's right. And so I think the purpose, so let's just talk about the purpose of renunciation, right? The way Baba uses it, it's so that you get closer to the truth or God. I mean, if it's 12 ways of realizing God or realizing Baba, that means that it's an aid in some way to getting closer to the truth. And so, but he did something fascinating. He said physical, mental, and spiritual, which is really unusual. Like most people don't think of renunciation as renouncing the spiritual. That's even more like PhD level renunciation. So that's why I started with the physical. Like anything that is a desire or an attachment in the physical world can become a block to getting closer to Baba if it pulls you away from Baba towards the world, right? Anything. It could be desire for a better car, or it could be anything. So but then let's talk about the mental for a second, because that's even more, for me, that's even more interesting than the physical. What does he mean by mental? What would we renounce mentally? Well, then I think about the two types of mental activity that Baba talks about in God Speaks, which is thinking, which is associated with the fifth plane, and feeling, which is associated with the sixth plane. So any thinking, if we're taking Baba literally here, that renunciation is important and that there's mental forces. Any thinking that's not true, right? So any false thinking is a problem and can be renounced. And likewise, any feeling that isn't true could be deceptive and could be renounced. So Baba said the only real thought, the only real feeling is I am God. Anything else is less than real. It's a type of an illusion. So the feeling of being separate from God, the thinking, it could be a story that we make up about somebody or a story we make up about ourselves. There's so many things that can be renounced. A simple way that I've renounced some of my thinking is something called Occam's razor that I use quite a bit. And it has to do with when things would happen in my life. If I didn't understand what was happening, I would make up a story in my mind about what was happening. And Occam's razor said, that's really not what's happening. Occam's razor says the simplest possible explanation for what's happened or is happening is the most probable. And so I would test Occam's razor, and I'd have this story in my mind about what happened. And then I'd find the person who I'd made up the story about, and I'd say, hey, what happened yesterday when da 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 da? And they say, oh yeah, I'm so sorry, I just forgot, And my story was some elaborate thing that was going on. And when they said they just forgot, that's why they didn't show up, I thought, wow, Occam's onto something right now, because that is the simplest possible explanation. There was no drama. It was just they forgot. So I like that that way of thinking. It's just one of many ways that we. Yeah, go ahead.
Occam Razor, is that a human being or a philosophy or what? I don't get it.
It's
I've
a philosophical tool of how to approach thinking. So you might know people, and it might be you, who make up stories about things when they don't. So we have in JP Morgan Chase, we had a story that in the absence, when I worked at JP Morgan Chase, one of the managers said to me, in the absence of information, people make up stories, and the stories they make up are much worse than the truth. And I thought, wow, that's really profound. And it's very, very true. So any kind of way to renounce that kind of thinking, any kind of false thinking or any kind of feelings that separate us from Baba or the truth, I think is part of what he's saying about renunciation. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying that I've renounced everything. I'm saying that I understand where I think he's pointing to is that by renouncing physical, mental, and spiritual, we can come closer to Baba and realize Baba. It's one of the ways. And I really want to talk about, after we talk about the mental, I really want to talk about the spiritual, because that's going to be even more interesting than the mental for me. But let's stop for a moment and pause. I'll hit pause and say, does anybody want to share about the physical and mental part of renunciation before I move on to?
Can I?
Go ahead. Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is something I wrote down. I made a little tune to it, so I have it written down in my Baba quote songbook. And it says, but this is what Baba said in Lord Mayher. It was in Lord Mayher. It says, you have not to renounce the world or to leave anything. Your wife, children, job, responsibilities. You do not have to renounce anything. The only thing you have to give up is your own self, ego.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Are you willing to sing the song that you wrote about that?
Yeah. I should be able to do that. Hold on a second.
You want to do it after a few minutes and get
Whatever
ready?
you, whatever.
All right, let's let some other, while you're preparing that, let's let some other people talk about physical and mental renunciation, and then Ron will give us the song version of that, because I love your songs, Ron.
I've shared this before. At Silence Day this year, we had to travel. We had to fly to England on that day. And there was no getting around it. And I'm not someone who finds it very successful talking things out with Baba that I'm aware of, but it has changed because I said to Baba, what do I do about this? And I got an answer. And the answer was to give up being anxious about traveling. And that would be, and I would do that internally. So the anxiety would be silenced internally. So I actually kind of had fun with it and thought almost holier than thou over every other Baba lover who was renouncing was renouncing talking that day externally, because I was experiencing something I had never experienced, was a calmness internally that I had never, ever experienced.
Well,
Go ahead.
I want to respond that that's exactly what I was talking about with the mental renunciation.
Yes.
Because anxiety is a mental issue or whatever you want to call it. And that is something that you can renounce. And it sounds like you did. That's a perfect story. Beautiful.
Thank you.
No, thank you. That was incredible. Licia, you understand what we're talking about?
Yeah.
You
Oh, yeah. I was thinking
a
when you
little
were
bit
talking
later
about
than-
story. Huh? No, I'm not in YouTube, I know. When I was thinking about all the stories we make of and assuming about everybody, ourselves, our problems, our people, we are assuming, you know. The story is, like you said, is to renounce to that kind of a judgment and to allow to things to happen in a natural way without fighting.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Ron, how are you doing? You about ready for the song?
I could try it. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just going to give you, go through it just one time. It only lasts about half a minute, but anyhow.
As you wish.
You have not to renounce the world or to leave anything. Your wife, children, job, responsibilities. You do not have to renounce anything. You do not have to renounce anything. The only thing you have to give up is your own self. Ego. Ego.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ron. Well, and your quote, Ron, actually confirms what I was saying, which is that the internal renunciation is really the key, and the external renunciation, I read somewhere else from Baba, is really just kind of the lead up to the internal renunciation. And I think that's what Baba's saying there too. And keep in mind, this word renunciation has a lot of baggage associated with it because it goes back in spiritual history. I think all faiths have a version of renunciation. So the in the past, the way people would renounce the world would be to give up their wife or their kids, like Buddha gave up his wife and kid and went and got his enlightenment, or they would go to a cave or go to the riverside or go to the mountaintop. And that Baba's really asking us to remain in the world but not of it. That's what I feel like is the whole gist of this. Are you guys ready to move on to the spiritual renunciation, or do you want to say more about the physical and mental? Because I know Jeff just joined us again.
Well, actually, I'd like to just say something that you and I've talked about, Laurent, and it's something that I got from your book on surrender, which was that I think there were 6 high roads that Baba talked about. And
Yes.
it's like, so if you can't really, renounce or not, if you can't really surrender, well, Baba is, gives us these options. And one of them is carrying on all worldly duties with a pure heart and a clean mind, and with equal acceptance of success and failure while remaining detached in the midst of intense activity. So that to me sounds like a lifetime of spiritual work right there. And but
Absolutely.
it's so packed. Okay, so it's all the things you're talking about.
Yeah, and if I could rewind to the beginning of that quote, because I think you didn't say the beginning, but it's also helps set the stage for what we're talking about. The beginning of that High Roads quote, Baba said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, "It is not possible for all to surrender to me as I would like." Like he's basically saying he understands the human condition, and that the whole world isn't just going to suddenly surrender to the avatar. So here's the other high roads that could eventually win the grace of God. And I believe he meant lead to that surrender eventually. So I think that's.
You just muted yourself, Laurent.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'd like to mute so that other people have a chance. I feel like I talk too much on these things, but I love that you brought that quote in. That was beautiful.
I wanted to talk about the mental before you go on to the spiritual. I think
Yeah,
this
go
has
ahead.
to do with mental. And that quote that I just sang, it meant Baba mentions what I think renunciation or renouncing something also means, which is to give it up, to give up. And one thing, because I've been involved with Baba groups for 50 years, and quite often being part of the boards of this group or that group, usually being in a large group, particularly the Bay Area group. That was a pretty big group, and I was on the board quite a bit. So one of the things that Baba said when you're dealing with people making decisions and things, especially with Baba work, to he wanted us to give up and give in. And so what I felt that how that played out for me was that he wanted me to do my duty and say what I thought, because that was part of uh, being on the board, was to look at the situation and say what I thought was going to be appropriate or inappropriate or right or wrong, whatever, and say it and explain it, and but um, but not be concerned about the outcome. Whatever
That's
the
right.
outcome was, if it wasn't the outcome that I thought would be the best, that I would just give in.
Yeah.
And once I heard about that, give up and give in, I went in for that, and it seems to have worked out pretty well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I've got a story related to that, but I want to honor the fact that Vanessa has joined us. Hi, love.
Hi.
We're doing 12 ways of realizing me. Way number 9. I'll read it one more time. Renunciation. If you renounce for me everything physical, mental, and spiritual, then you have me, Baba said. And I found it fascinating that he ended it with and spiritual. We've already covered some of the physical and mental, and we're about to move into the spiritual. But if you have thoughts about the physical and mental renunciation, we'd love to hear them, Vanessa. Vanessa is a very wise woman. I love her insight.
Oh,
Yes.
thanks, love. No, I really don't have anything right away, but
Okay.
although I
Okay.
feel like I've been, renunciating my whole life one way or another.
I don't want to put you on the spot. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. Ron, if I could piggyback on what you were saying, have you guys ever heard the story that Charles Haynes tells? It's quite an involved story, but I can sum it up. Kind of the gist of it was he had been going to university at Emory in Atlanta, and he was very active there in different work with the students and like different activist work that he did and other really important stuff that there were blocks and there were challenges similar to what you're saying, Ron, where he would speak up and there was, the school governance and all this kind of stuff. So he came back to Myrtle Beach to talk to what he would say is Auntie Boo, which is, of course, Elizabeth Patterson, because she was such a guide, an incredible, wise guide for him. And he kind of, vented about this situation at Emory, that he's worked so hard at this and it's not going the way he wants. And he got to the point where he just said to her, like, I've had it. I'm just going to give it up, And she basically heard him out and she said, is that it? Is there more that you want to say? And she said, and Charles said, no, that's basically it, And she said, well, good. Now you're ready to go back and really do the work, And it was that sense of, because he had reached the point where he wasn't attached to the outcome anymore and he had given it up, now he should go back and do it. I love that. I thought that was brilliant. Does that resonate with you, Ron, at all?
Absolutely. That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one, right? And I'm not doing the story justice, but I believe he has it in his book about Elizabeth. I think it's called something like The Day Becomes the Answer or something like that. But he wrote a beautiful book about Elizabeth. I recommend it. Shall we move on to the spiritual, or should we talk more about the physical and mental renunciation? I haven't really studied this deeply. I can't claim to be any kind of master of renunciation or having thought this through completely, but I did think about it a little bit naturally because it's Sahavas for everyone. And one of the things I thought about is, well, what could he possibly mean by renouncing the spiritual? Like, what would that look like? And then I thought, well, a couple things come to mind. Especially Jeff, you could probably confirm this. In the early days, people were following different masters, right? Like Yogananda or different masters in India or saints or whatever. And some of those masters and saints would give their followers experiences. They'd have spiritual experiences. But in Baba's Mandali and followers, they did not have, for the most part, the types of experiences that people were talking about in other spiritual groups. So I think there was this kind of interest in having spiritual experience, and then Baba talking about the planes, and then saying, "But I veil my closest lovers from having those experiences because they're really not the truth. They're just more of a distraction than anything else." So he kind of said that he would take us under the veil to the truth. And I think part of what he might mean, I'm not sure, I'm just kind of airing it for the first time here, is renouncing the spiritual meaning, like renouncing the longing for spiritual experience other than loving him, and the joy of reciprocal relationship with Baba. I'm just going to throw that out and see how people feel about that.
Well, I recall, and I don't quite remember the source of it, but I think was that, like, for example, in the times when Baba was in Myrtle Beach, and he was having people come into the lagoon cabin. He called them interviews, okay, and they would come in and they would have these extraordinary experiences of Baba, and see, whatever that was that they would see, and practically, just fall into Baba's lap and be ecstatic. And I heard the Mandali would kind of say to Baba, what about me? what if, and Baba would say, you'd be useless if I did that for you. So it is, if I can share, I mean, when I was in my earlier days with Baba, I had what, I would call pretty extraordinary experiences of Baba, okay? But they also were, if I could characterize them, they were at a time when I was really, in a way, hugely out of balance, okay? And so, and then gradually, as I kind of like worked through my whatever stuff and became more, grounded, I didn't have those experiences like that, okay? And but I think it's better to be grounded. But I think Baba does kind of reach out and give us experiences when we really need it, because they did become carved indelibly in my experience and my being.
I think that's exactly right, and I love that you added on the end of that when we really need it, because I think it is a needs-based thing that when we need anything, I believe Baba gives it to us. So I love that.
I have
Thank you,
one
Jeff.
more anecdote on that theme, which is from Margaret Krask, who, when she was there with the women from the West who came in the 30s, she was hearing some things from Elizabeth and Norina. They would tell each other, that they had this particular dream of Baba or a vision of Baba or something like that, and they were talking to each other, but Margaret was overhearing this, and she started to wonder why it would be that she had never had those experiences of a dream, seeing Baba in a dream or a vision or anything like that. And it kind of was weighing on her that maybe she was thinking she wasn't spiritual enough or didn't love Baba enough or something like that, right? And so Baba said, "What's on your mind?" And she tells him about that, hearing these other people are having these dreams and things like that, and I never had one. The way I remember it is like Baba said, "What? You never had any dreams of me? Is that right?" Wow, that's really that's different, But and so he said, "Do you know why you haven't had any?" She says, "No, Bob, I don't." He said, "Well, you don't need any. That's all. If
Yeah.
you needed it, you'd get it."
Yeah. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Well, I'm sure we all have those little tiny miracles that continue to show up, and they feel like Baba's presence, whether we're feeling, that sort of intoxication or not, but just the events that just sort of remind us, or say, oh yeah, there you are again. I see you. The hand of God.
Yeah, and something else came up when you said that I just remembered. It's a little bit of a story, so please forgive me for telling this one. But the gist of it is that Don Stevens was an executive at Chevron. Standard Oil of California got split into many companies. One of them became Chevron, and he stayed on at Chevron, and he worked there for decades. And at some point, he felt pretty, I think the words I would use would be something like maybe ashamed or concerned about his lifestyle with Chevron. They were flying him around the world. He told me he had, experiences with geisha girls and the best restaurants and all this experience. And then he'd go to India to be with Baba and the Mandali, and they had 2 boiled vegetables and, very unusual lifestyle compared to his. And he eventually said to Baba, I want to give you some money every month from my salary. Now, Don did not have children and he was not married, so he had extra money. And so Baba said some interesting things, and I'm gonna tie this into the spiritual in a second. Baba said to him, "Well, that's interesting, Don. How much do you feel you'd like to give Baba?" And so Don gave him some idea, and Baba said, well, hang on now. And he would say things like, Don told me this whole story. It's quite long, but I'm trying to make it shorter. He said, well, what about your mother? Does she have enough? And then Don would say, well, what the situation was, the finances with his mother. And then Baba would say things like, well, what if you end up in a financial crunch? We'd have to have an agreement that then we could modify that amount if you needed money at that time, and Baba went back and forth with Don about this money thing for days. It wasn't a quick conversation. And at the very end of it, Baba said to Don, well, listen, Don, many people have offered me money, as you can imagine. And I don't usually accept money from people because they have an expectation that if they give me money, they will get some spiritual reward in return for giving me the money. And I'm not interested in that. He said, but Don, I will accept the money from you. So that told me that story told me a lot of things all in one, which is that Baba obviously was not happy about people expecting spiritual, what would you call it? Like progress or grace.
Favors,
Huh?
like favors for.
Yeah. That it wasn't the relationship with the master or the relationship with God wasn't a bargaining or a transaction, And so Baba basically laid that out to Don. And by saying to Don, I'll accept your money, he was also, in my mind, saying, Don's not like that. Don doesn't think and behave that way. So Don's giving was, in my estimation, maybe pure or without strings attached. Now, there's a couple of caveats here, which is that ties back to renouncing the spiritual for me, that if you can give without expecting anything from Baba or God, that's part of renouncing the spiritual, because it's all it's all in Baba's hands. It's all Baba's timing and Baba's grace. It's like, what's the point of giving if it's a transaction? It's not, that's not the idea. And that Baba said at the end, the very, very end, he said, now, Don, you're not going to send me the money every month. You're going to give the money every month to who I direct you to give it to. And Don was not expecting this at all. And Bob said, and when I tell you each month who I want you to give it to, and it could be different from month to month, you cannot argue or ask me to explain it. Those were the conditions, which I feel is also truly amazing, because then Don said, you know, because you know how you would talk to me very casually, he'd say, little bear, there was times when he told me who to give the money to, and it was not at all somebody who I thought I should be giving the money to. Like, because in Don's limited understanding of what was going on, he didn't like the idea. Hang on, I got to plug in my computer.
I'm going to go to the arc charger too, because it's about.
Yeah.
So does that story make sense the way I'm telling it? I hope so.
Yeah,
That-
that's a good one.
It's a good one, right? And it's like that.
That's a humdinger. Not a,
Yeah, and that Don couldn't say, well, what the heck, Baba? Why should this person get money? Or he couldn't do it. He was not allowed to.
Well, Baba didn't want him attached in any way. He wanted to give it so freely, without those strings, right? And it reminds me of something that he did. I heard this story from Adi Arjani from Pakistan. He was at the center one time, and he told this story to a couple of us, that he was going to get a sabbatical. No, it wasn't a sabbatical. No, it was just a period, like a month off or something of it from his work. That's what it was. And he wrote to Baba because he got this idea of something he thought he could do on that month, which was to be silent and fast. So he thought that's something he could do because he had the time off, and otherwise, when would he be able to do it? He wouldn't be able to do it when he was working his job. And so he wrote it to Baba that he wanted to do this, but he wanted Baba to accept it and sanction that. And Baba said, well, you should understand, I want you to understand that, when the avatar comes, things like keeping silence and fasting really have no spiritual benefit, particularly for anyone. And so I just want you to know that. But if you want to do it, and since you want to do it, I grant you go ahead and do it. So he basically told him, you get, even whatever he was thinking, who knows what was really in his mind or his unconscious mind about it, but he found that pretty powerful for Baba to take away any possibility that he would get any spiritual benefit out of it.
That's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I share a story?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Years ago in the 1980s, I ended up running a polo exchange between the United States and India, where I was working with His Highness the Maharaj of Jaipur. And so there was a point in time where I thought, my goodness, this is really super worldly. And I would go, when I'm finished from Jaipur, I'd go to Nagar there, and that was pretty darn cool. And then, but at one point I was feeling, this is just not spiritual. I mean, this is all this sort of, high class stuff, whatever. And so I decided I would ask one of the Mandali, what their take was on it. So I decided that the person would be Mansari. And the reason I thought that was because Baba had really restricted her. She couldn't go across the railroad tracks, and she was probably the least worldly of the Mandali that I knew. Okay. So I told her this thing, and I was really concerned that I was, I shouldn't really be doing this. And she just kind of looked at me funny. She says, "What's the harm?" And that was it. It was like, Ah. So,
I missed the main line of what was it you were going to do? I forgot. What did you
well,
ask?
I was, I'd been involved in sports, okay, and I was running a polo exchange between the United States and India. And that was
Polo,
the game
polo.
with horseback polo, yes, right. And and that was with royalty there, with the Maharaja of Jaipur and all that sort of crowd. And, pretty darn worldly from my point of view, okay, as a contrast to like what Laurent was talking about with Don. He'd come there and they'd eat a couple of vegetables and that sort of thing. And so I decided I would ask, and Mondley advised me, and I decided it would be Montessori because she would be the person that would the least likely to tell me what I thought I wanted to hear. Okay, because she was so restricted by Baba. And so I asked her, I told her about it, and she just sort of looked at me and she put her hands in the air, kind of that kind of bit of Baba look, and she said, "What's the harm?" And that was it. What's the harm? Well, so
What
like,
is a polo exchange? Meaning like
well, between, I would take a team from the United States,
a team?
a team of polo players, right, to
Yeah.
India. And then I would bring, His Highness and his team, often members of his royal family, but then members of the 61st Cavalry of the Indian Army. And it was cool. And it was, kind of.
Get matches scheduled and like that. Is that right? Is that what?
Yes, we'd have matches in Jaipur and we'd have matches in the United States. And then we had them in England. And so it was, it was a good bit of fun. And then
Yeah. So that was not being done prior to you doing it, or you just got into the game of that practice.
well, there's a whole
international.
Yeah, there's a whole kind of story around it. I don't want to take our time here, but it's kind of fun, kind of funny, but like just one little thing is that at one point I had received a polo ball from in New Delhi from the president's bodyguard. Okay, and so I brought it to India. I brought it to Marazad, and I offered it to Mara, and she had me sort of stand there, and she put her hand below, and my hand was. She started me to have it above, and I was to drop the polo ball into her hand, right, and then I would receive letters from Mani. After that, saying, "Oh, we have the polo ball up the top of the refrigerator, and we remember you." And I'd be really touched. I mean, like, so that little polo, and it had its beauty for me. Okay, and
Awesome.
the connection with Beher Baba.
That's a great story. I think I want to tell another story if that's okay. I think it's related to what we've been talking about, unless somebody else has something.
Yes.
So it's related to this renunciation of the spiritual. And it's a very powerful story that Don told me. I'm going to try to keep it short, but I have to do it a little bit of justice here. And it was that, Baba had asked Don to edit the discourses, which Deshmukh had created, which was the 5-volume set, into what became the 3-volume 6th edition set. So Don was doing that work, and it took quite a while. And at one point, Don went back to Marazad to see Baba, and Baba said, "How is that going? With the discourses?" And Don said, "It's going well. It's coming along. With there's a lot to it." And he said, "But I do have a question. I'm now quite confused about." And Baba said, "What is the question?" And Don said, "Well, you see, Baba, when I came to you from Murshida Martin and Sufism, she had given me a meditation to do, and I was doing it. But when we came under your guidance, you took away my meditation, and that's fine," he said. "But then here I am editing the discourses," and he said, "There are more discourses on meditation than on any other subject. So how is it that there's so many discourses on meditation, which makes it obviously important, but then you took away my meditation and haven't given me another one? And Baba said, well, that's a great question, Don. He did. And he said, you see, I'm just telling you how Don told me this story. He said, you see, when the avatar manifests, the path of love is wide open to all of humanity. And during that time, it is the highest of all paths to God. And it is a relative waste of your time to focus on meditation because of the path of love. And, you know, that's the path that you're on, the path of love. And so gradually, the path of love will once again narrow, and only heroes on the path will take the path of love. And he said, now, as the avatar, I have a responsibility to all of humanity until I come again. And those discourses on meditation are not for now. They're for then, when the path of love has narrowed, and then of the other paths besides the path of love. Meditation is, of course, a wonderful path, and many people will take that path. And that's what I've provided for them. That's the story.
You know, in the discourses, in addition to the specific discourses on meditation, Baba drops it in here and there. Okay, like in the if I'm thinking correctly, like in the removal of sanskaras, of which he says is of the utmost importance that we're removing our sanskaras, and that, you know, that meditation is one of it. And he gives specific meditations in there, like I am the infinite, I am in everything, I'm in all. Okay, so and he's suggesting that you just, you know, think that or say that, so as a meditation and as a pathway of removal of sanskaras.
Absolutely. And I think the gist of the story for me is that the work Baba and Don were doing on discourses was different than the path Don was on in the path of love, and that the primary purpose of the discourses on meditation was not for Don and not for now. And I think that's extraordinary.
Indeed.
It's for us now.
Well, that's between you and Baba, right?
Yeah. Well, I suppose it's like all things. It can be a hybrid. You know, like obviously, remembrance of Baba is a meditation. And then you know, now it reminds me, and I think this is worth sharing. But in the discourses on meditation, Baba talks about the place, the purpose or place of personal meditation.
That's what I was just going to say, that there's two main types, personal and impersonal.
Right. But in the personal, he said that there's four phases, as he calls it. Okay. I think I shared this one time with you because I kind of like, I pulled it out and then it sort of jumped out. But the first phase is the, so what did the Bible say is the perception that the perception that the spiritual ideal is within the master. Okay, so the first is that it's there. So like, that Meher Baba guy, he's kind of interesting there, right? And then the second thing is to concentrate upon the master as the spiritual ideal. Okay, that's the second phase is the concentration. The third phase is to love the spiritual master as the embodiment of the spiritual ideal. Okay, so that's all cool. But then the fourth phase of personal meditation is I'm trying to remember exactly the word, but it is the expression of the spiritual ideal in one's own life. So it occurred to me is that it's great to to, to recognize, to concentrate, to love Baba. But, what he wants us to do is to express this in our own lives and to manifest the spirituality, not just, in a state of reverence, but actually, to live it, to breathe it, to do it, to ourselves be the embodiment of the spiritual ideal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that reminds me of that great quote called The Game. You know that quote?
Oh my goodness, love it. Can
Yeah.
I say
What? Can you
I've memorized it, quote. So
can you share it?
to penetrate into the
Yeah,
essence of
I love
all being and significance, and to release the fragrance of that inner attainment for the guidance and benefit of others by expressing in the world of forms truth, love, purity, and beauty. This is the sole game which has intrinsic and absolute worth. All other happenings, incidents, and attainments in themselves are of no lasting importance.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I love that quote too.
Doesn't that tie back into what you were just saying? I think that quote kind of sums up what you were just saying.
Which about
Exactly, about the meditations of the master.
Expressing in the world of forms the spiritual ideal. Baba
Oh,
says
yeah.
it in the quote.
Oh yeah.
Boom, boom.
Well, there's another great quote from Baba, which actually just really kind of tells us what it's all about. He says that the sojourn of the soul is a thrilling divine romance, in which the lover, who in the beginning is conscious of nothing but emptiness, frustration, superficiality, and the gnawing against of the chains of bondage, gradually attains the fuller and freer expression of love, and who ultimately disappears and merges in the divine beloved to realize the unity. And I'm kind of losing at the end, but the unity of lover and beloved in the eternal fact, and Baba said it this way, the fact of God as infinite love.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You could open up.
I'd like to go back to Mansari's comment and suggest something. Did she say what would be the harm?
Yes.
So, yeah. So what would be the harm? Now, one thing that I've come to, one thing I decided long ago was to not ask Baba about things of the world, what I should do in the world. If it's a worldly matter, then I should just do whatever I think is the right thing to do and give the results to Baba, but not ask him what I should do. Because I think for the most part, most of those kinds of things, in almost every case, Baba's answer would be, it doesn't matter. Do whichever is best.
Yeah.
So why bother him about it? And so it's but the thing is, if we start taking worldly matters seriously, are we? And then we ask Baba, then it sort of is confusing that we're taking Baba seriously or the world seriously. But Baba wanted us to take Baba seriously and the world lightly, and so I think it's best for myself just to not bother him about that and do the best I can, and I'll learn any lessons that he wants me to learn. That's his job. Uh, but as far as those kinds of decisions, uh, I think he wants me to take care of it on my own and just do the smartest or wisest, most loving or whatever in that particular case. And I also remember that Baba said something similar to let's see, what was her name now? Oh gosh, uh, Civilization and Chaos author.
Irene Coney Bear.
Thank you, Irene. Um, he when he told her to go back to America, he said, "Now, if you get some kind of a situation where you have a worldly matter that you are confused about or not uncertain about," he says, just do the best you can with that. You figure it out as best you can. If it's a spiritual, if it's about spirituality, he said you can confer with Norina Machiavelli. Norina Machiavelli. Just, see what she has to say about it.
Okay.
That's
So-
amazing.
Hmm.
Well, that reminds me of something else then that's connected to the mental renunciation, since you said all that, Ron, which is that Malcolm Schloss, you might remember Jean Adriel's husband before they got divorced. Malcolm Schloss was at the 3 Incredible Weeks with Baba in 1954, I believe it was. And he said to Baba at one point, would you explain to us, Baba, about repression, psychological repression? And Baba said something like, I'll explain about it tomorrow. And then tomorrow came, and Malcolm reminded Baba, Baba, you said you would explain today about repression. And then Baba looked at Malcolm and said, work it out for yourself. And I thought that was fantastic because it's almost like I'm just going to tell you how I read that interaction. I'm not saying this is what Baba said in any way, but I read it almost like, here's Baba trying to get everybody on the spiritual path and closer to the truth. And what Malcolm was kind of hung up on was a psychological issue, which was important to Malcolm, but it wasn't really that important to Baba or the scene going on in the 3 Incredible Weeks with all these men who had come from the West. So Baba just basically brushed it off and said, figure it out for yourself. I think that's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Maya's job in Maya's game with Baba, wrestling for us, our souls. One of the main things that's in the discourses is that Maya wants what's important to come across as unimportant, and what is unimportant to come across as important. So
That's right.
these are, if we're going to wrestle with Maya, Baba says, learn Maya's tricks, and that's one of them.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Ron.
Yeah.
Vanessa, we're going to come to the top of the hour and probably wrap it up here soon. Is there anything you wanted to share before we wrap it up? I know you've been very patient in listening.
No. I was just happy to listen.
Okay. Okay. I just want to honor your presence.
Thank you.
Let's go once more around and then we can do a wrap. Last burning thoughts, feelings, desires about renunciation.
Well, Baba talks over and over again in the discourses about transformation and about that happens naturally when through the experience of life that we realize values. Okay, and so he said, Baba said that, and I often remember this, but at the right, at critical times, is about that there's an energy that's generated when we perceive these values, and then they transform us. Because I think he said something at different times, different ways, but that will draw a curtain upon our old patterns of life. Okay, so it's always like kind of a progression, like you're renouncing one thing for the next, and then you might get to another point where you're renouncing that, and it's like the confusion about good and evil, and Baba says, well, basically good is another binding, right? And that eventually has to be given up. So that's the totality of it, that everything, the spirituality, the good, the virtues that we might have, the values that we have, it's all, like that. But it is the game. It's the game, like we were talking about before, to express in the world of forms, the truth, love, purity, and beauty. So it's just playing the game, not worrying about it so much, right?
There's another
Awesome.
thing about repression or renouncing or repression. Baba talks about that I read it that when somebody wants to repress something or change something by the main way of just trying to just do it, sometimes it's not going to happen because our sanskars and our impressions are going to come to get us so fast. So he says the only way is to bring a new value that will really attract us much more so that we can exchange it for that.
I think that's like a sublimation process that he talks about.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Alicia.
Found Lisa's comment interesting, but I didn't quite grasp it. It'd be a challenge to repeat it, I bet. You think you could, Lisa?
We'll repeat it.
oh yeah. Actually, I'm gonna bring the book. I'll come. I have it
Okay.
just in the right place.
He's got to bring the book.
Yes.
So in the meantime, we're here.
This is all about worry and whether you live or die, go crazy or survive. What when you would talk about the topic like repression, or there was a doctor, a holistic doctor, became a holistic doctor and was very anti-AMA. Regular doctors on the whole, he was very critical of them for treating patients only to the extent that they're going to have to come back again and again and again to make sure they keep coming back for treatment, that they don't make them well. They don't, no interest in finding out, getting to the root of a diagnosis. I forget that man's name. He was very popular with the Kashouti family. And he called it, but he did approach the spiritual side regarding the causes of illness. And he said, innervation. When you take a problem or a concern or a worry and just let it eat you up, you can't stop it. You entertain it in that regard, from that aspect. Actually, our psyche entertains it or works with it, gnaws on it, and we're gnawing on ourselves because we don't know how to look within. For sublimation means, I figured it meant like submarine. You'd go, because Baba used to also say how to deal with things. You just dive in, jump in with it, dive into yourself, So
Yeah, all
I
that,
thought,
all that's in the
when I
discourse.
ran into first, I thought, how the hell do you do that? I mean, to take it literally, then he seemed to be offering in that way means whatever it takes to have reflect upon oneself.
Yeah, I think it's more than reflection. I think reflection is the beginning of the process, not the end.
Innervation. So this doctor, whose name almost came back to me, was talking about innervation, about thinking, like what Bob says, to think critically and constructively about problems, to find to develop a positive mode of action or thought process that is at the root of the concern, the worry, the thing that is making you anxious and giving us anxiety. Right.
Thank you, Ralph.
No, I cannot.
We lost our
I can't
comment.
find.
Okay, that's okay. So, Any other thoughts and feelings before we wrap?
Well, she couldn't find him.
No. Okay. Avatar Meher Baba.
Ki
Jai.
Jai.
Day.
Avatar Meher
Baba Ki Jai.
Avatar
Baba
Meher
Meher
Baba.
Baba Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Baba.